Hello guys and welcome back to the Minifairs channel. If you've been keeping up with the series, I've been going over all the new cards we're getting in Power of the Elements. Start with Sprites, then T-Elements, then we went into Exorcisters and the Ricka support, and now I got suggested to do the Vernalizer cards, or as they're now called, VERNUSYLPHs. Pretty cool name, I guess. Doesn't roll off the tongue as good though, so So I'll be going over this deck, each and every one of the cards, how good they are, how I think they'll do in the current meta game, well, in Power of the Elements meta game, all the things it can do, what builds you can try with it, and if it's able to compete with the tier 1 decks. Before we start, make sure to leave a comment on any other cards you want me to talk about next in Power of the Elements. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and let's get right into the video. So starting off the Vernalizer lineup, we have Hills and Blooms. So all the Vernalizers have the effect to discard themselves and a monster or Vernalizer Fairy card for a unique effect for each of the Vernalizers, plus the effect to reborn any earth monster in the grave. But they do have the downside of locking you into earth effects for the entire turn. So you have to be basically playing a very earth dependent deck to get the full use out of this archetype, but there are some cool stuff you can try with it. They also have a bunch of on-field effects. Hills and Blooms, as I was going on, this one you can discard itself and a card to search for any Vernalizer Fairy card, including the spells and traps. So it's pretty good to get your engine rolling, gets you any of the other monsters to continue your lines. It gets you any of the traps for interruption or generating advantage, basically. Yeah, it's probably the best one to start with, just to get stuff in the grave, basically. It also has the on-field effect of protecting your Vernalizer Fairies from card destruction, basically. Card effect destruction. Not the worst effect, but also not the best, because we don't have the best search targets with it right now. Because the Vernalizer support that we are getting in the near future is extremely good and much better than the cards we have right now. But once we get those cards, this card becomes much better because you can then search those cards, which are actually really good. Right now, it's probably still like the second best Vernalizer, but its capability is very limited right now. And moving on, we have the next Vernalizer, which is Flowers and Fields. So this one adds an earth monster from grave to your hand. You can add back any earth you discard or send from deck with this card, basically. So you can do some cool interactions and get some cool earth monsters out of the deck, combining this with the other Vernalizers. So some pretty cool stuff you can do with it. But it is pretty bricky, and you never want to start with this Vernalizer because by itself, it literally can't do anything if you don't have an earth monster in grave. So yeah, it's kind of meh by itself, but once you have your engine rolling, this is a really good card. Its on-field effect also protects your Vernalizer Fairies from targeting, but like these on-field effects aren't really relevant because you're never really going to have the Vernalizer Fairies on board, because we don't have the good one, which is the boss monster yet. Moving on, we have Winnie the Pooh. If that's not Winnie the Pooh, who is Winnie the Pooh? He looks more like Winnie the Pooh than Winnie the Pooh. It's mountains and melting snow. So this one is just a draw. You discard this and another for a random draw, then summon one from grave. So as you can tell, it's just the worst one because it's just a random draw, but it's okay. It's just a good way to get cards in the grave and get another card to hand. So it's also got the onboard effect where a Vernalizer can attack twice, but again, we don't have the boss monster, so it's kind of average, and all the Vernalizers are very small, so you don't really want them attacking anyway. The next one, we have the best one in my opinion, Flowers and Awakening. So what this one does is discard another card to send any earth monster that can be normal summoned to set from your deck to the grave, and then special another from grave. So you can use this to dump a bunch of earth targets. I'll go through a few of them now. So you can send stuff like Regulus, one of the newer earth targets that's really good, and then special an earth back, and then use another Vernalizer to reborn the Regulus. And then you can keep getting this Regulus back because you can just keep like sending Regulus for its negate, and then using Vernalizers to reborn the Regulus. So it's just like a consistent negate that you can get back every single turn. You can also get out Pancratops. This is an Earth that can be normal summoned to set. You can dump it and reborn the same way. You can also go for a Morphage Goliath or a Morphage Sloth, like your preference. A Morphage Sloth is easier to get because you can just tribute summon it, but Goliath is also bigger, so, you know, up to your personal preference. And I mean, just locking your opponent out of the extra deck is pretty good in general, so it's a pretty good card to go into. You could even go into the Earth Barrier statue. Like, you can dump this and add it back off of the Flowers and Fields and a normal summon this. So you can like set up a Regulus Negate plus this and then lock them out of Earth, lock them out of anything but Earths, which is kind of risky because if they're playing like Punks or something, it's not the best, but you know. And then there's other stuff like generic Earth decks, like Earth Machines. You can dump a bunch of Earth Machines for that deck. You can dump a bunch of Adamancipators and reborn the Adamancipators. You know, just a bunch of cards you can dump and special, etc. Bunch of cool stuff you can do with this archetype. And next up we have the Continuous Spell. So what this card does is all monsters on the field, well, all your Earth monsters are treated as Vernalizer Fairies. Once per turn, if you would use a Vernalizer Fairy in hand to discard itself on a card, you can make it so that it only discards itself, but only once per turn. So it basically prevents one discard and treats your stuff as Vernalizer Fairies. So it's pretty bad because the only way to search this is with Hills and Blooms. So you'll have to discard 2 cards to search this just to prevent an extra discard for your second Vernalizer Fairy. So it's pretty bad. And I don't think it's worth playing at all in the deck. It's too bricky and it's just not worth the amount of investment you could put into it. And the next card we have is Rotation. So this is a pretty weird card. It's pretty cool. You can target a Vernalizer Fairy in grave and either add it to hand or special it. During your opponent's turn, if you have no cards in hand, except the turn this card sent to grave, you can banish it to special as many Vernalizer Fairies as possible from the grave. So it's a soul charge, and then they return to hand in the end phase. So basically, you can use this in your opponent's end phase to summon back all your Vernalizer Fairies and add them back to hand. So it's a good recovery tool. Like, I would never want to set this up. Like, I would never want to set this for the first effect. I would rather to search it off of the Hills and Blooms, then discard it with another Vernalizer so that I can set up the Soul Charge effect for my opponent's turn. Because there's no way I'm waiting till turn 4 to use the Soul Charge effect, because the game's pretty much almost always over by then. And it's pretty cool to get like the Vernalizers on board if you need to prevent like an OTK or something. And yeah, I guess like if you do have the Continuous Spell, then they do protect your Earth monsters by card effects and targeting, but like I still don't think it's worth playing the Continuous Spell. And the last trap card we get is Flower Buds, which is pretty good. It's pretty good. So what this card does is you can target face-up cards your opponent controls up to the number of Earth monsters you control with different names, specialed from the grave specifically. And then you can return those Earth monsters you control to the hand and then bounce the cards you targeted. If you pair this with a Soul Charge, it just bounces 4 cards for free. So it's pretty cool. It is also a Mystic Mine out, I guess. You know, searchable compulse is pretty cool, but it is up to you if you want to play it. It's not mandatory. It's not the best. Those are all the cards for the deck, but right now I don't think the deck would be strong in a pure form. I mean, I guess you can stun your opponent out with like Goliath and like Reguluses and Pancratops, stuff like that. But like by itself, I don't think it's really doing much. It's probably stronger like splashed into an Earth deck, like in Earth Machines or something like that. But yeah, right now I don't think it's the best by itself. It definitely becomes way better once we get the new support, because they have... I'll go over the new support when we get them, but they get a boss monster. They get a new main deck monster, which is probably better than all the ones we currently have. And also, this deck is really limited right now because we don't have the Ishizu support yet. because the Ishizu support is really good with the Vernalizer cards because they directly support Earth Fairies, and these are all Earth Fairies, and these directly support Earths, and they're all Earths. So like both the archetypes mesh very well together. So, and them milling lots of cards is great for this deck because it gives you lots of Earths to be able to summon back from grave. So this deck is not the best until we get the new Ishizu support plus the new Vernalizer support. So right now I can't see it going anywhere higher than like a rogue strategy. Like, it could sneak into like a top 32, like 1 out of 32 decks, but I don't see it like stealing multiple slots in a top cut. It's definitely a rogue deck that can perform, but definitely doesn't have the capability to win a high tier event, and it really will struggle against decks like Sprite, Tearlament, and Rika and Exorcister. So right now, its potential is very limited, but its future potential is very high and will have the capability to compete in the future. But right now, it's definitely a rogue deck, a rogue strategy. But it's a very cool rogue strategy if you do decide to go for this. So all power to you if you want to go for this deck right now. If you do want to try this deck out now, feel free. It's not the worst strategy. There's definitely worse rogue strategies out there that have done better. So yeah, that has been Vernalizers, or VERNUSYLPHs. If you have any suggestions for anything else you want to see out of POTE, drop a comment down below. I'll make sure to do them. Next episode, I'm going to be covering a bunch of staples and some Melfi cards and stuff like that. We're getting to the end of this analyzing series, and I'll soon be dropping some combo tutorials for all these new decks, so you'll be able to play all the new decks at the best potential you could possibly play them. If you need any of these new cards, make sure to hit up Jam Jam Cards UK. They have a bunch of cases coming in, so they have a lot of cards available for pre-order. So make sure to pick up these cards now through eBay or Facebook, so you're ready for Euros, because Euros is going to be a big event with all these new cards, and it's going to be really cool. And if you do end up playing Vernalizers at Euros, mate, you're a king. You're a king. Well, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and peace.